Welcome to this quick start guide for EastWest Hollywood Orchestrator. This is going to be a quick dive into the new Hollywood Orchestrator, and it's just going to help you get started writing your own scores quickly. So, without too much babble, let's jump in. If you load up your Hollywood Orchestrator by dragging an instance of Opus into your DAW. Opus is the new software from EastWest. It's kind of replacing the Play software. Open that up and then go to Browse, find your Hollywood Orchestrator, pop that up, and here we have the Orchestrator as it is. So the Orchestrator separates all of the instruments into sections just like an orchestra, at least an orchestral score. So we have the woodwinds, the brass, the percussion, and the strings. And within each section are the sections of, or the divisions of instruments. So, and going from top to bottom, it goes highest pitched instrument to lowest. So, for example, in the strings, at the top, we have the first violins, and then going down, we have the second violins, violas, celli, and double basses. So, there are a ton of things that we can look at here, but really I just want to dive right into making your own patterns, your own ostinatos, your own scores. So, Hollywood Orchestrator is essentially a complex arpeggiator. At the base of it's just an arpeggiator that takes the chord that you play and breaks it up into a certain pattern that you create. So to start creating patterns, let's start with a celli ostinato. Some rhythmic pattern that is going to keep repeating, that will really set the foundation for our score. And I'm also going to adjust the tempo. So up here you see the tempo markings. You can't change that here because we're in a DAW. If we're in the standalone edition, we could change the tempo here. In your DAW, you have to change it wherever wherever the tempo is in your DAW. So I'm going to switch this to 120. Something simple like that. Now let's get into building a pattern here. So we've got our staccato celli loaded. We see that over here. This is our instrument. And this is where we're going to do most of our work. Click on the editor. It'll bring up the pattern editor, the pattern grid. And this is just a MIDI note grid. But it's a MIDI note grid that's specifically for the celli. And these notes in here are steps within the chord. And this point here where it says all is your central point. It's where you're going to start with everything. So right now, if I play, let's say, a C minor chord, I'll be doing a lot in C minor today. Because the celli are set to all notes, right now they're playing all three notes of the chord, C, E flat, G. They're playing them all together. Typically, with a bass rhythm, you want the basses, the bass notes to be playing, or the bass instruments, I should say, but to be playing the lowest note in the chord. So here we can select which note in the chord this instrument section should be playing. In our case, we want to set it to lowest. Now if I turn off the pattern editor and bring it back up, now we can see that all has changed to lowest. So this is the central point of our grid of our instrument notes. And now when I play that C minor chord, you hear it's just playing the lowest note of the chord. It's just playing the C. If I change that to a B diminished, we just hear that B. So now we can start. We have our note selected. Our cello are just playing one note of the chord. Now we can set a rhythmic pattern for that note. So I'm going to do. It's an 8th and 16th note pattern that I like for marches. We can expand the grid here so we can see more of. So the notes are bigger, and I want this to be 8th note, 8th note, 16, 16, 16, and then an 8th note. Yeah, that's correct. So, so you can see up here, we have the number of bars. We can change this. I'm going to switch this to 2 because we don't need 4 bars, and it just deleted my pattern. So we have to be careful about that. If you make a change, it's going to delete your pattern, so you got to put it back in. All right, just get this 8th note set. Why isn't that working out? Oh, because there we go. All right, so now I have an 8th, 16th note pattern. And I have it across 1 bar. I want to get it to 2 bars. I could draw it in again, or I could hit this button here that says all. Next to that is a copy. And so it's going to select and copy all of the notes that are here. Copy and paste. A word of caution. This all section here, if you hit this delete, it removes everything. I've learned that the hard way. So you really want to make sure that you avoid this delete button, this all delete, or unless you absolutely want to delete everything, and because you can't get it back. I just hit Control Z and it just wiped out my opus altogether. So if you've built a complex pattern and you hit that delete button, you're making it again. There's no way to get it back. There we go. All right, now we have our 2-bar pattern, and if I play that C minor chord again, we're not going to hear anything because, and this is a little annoying, you need to shut off your pattern editor and switch and toggle on the pattern. So I've come to the pencil to turn off the pattern editor, and now I have to hit this little power button next to in the cello section, and that switches the pattern on. So now that I've done that, all right, that's still a little fast. Let's bring that back down to 120. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly what I want. And so now we have a rhythmic foundation. And we can switch chords. And just hold the chords down, and Orchestrator is going to start playing your patterns. Now, we can start to add some meat to this. A quick way to add some more depth and more bass to this, we're going to copy all of the notes, hit copy, and then we're going to go to the basses, load in staccato basses, have them play the lowest note, so they're going to be playing the same note as the cello, but we're going to have them play an octave lower. So this octave button, I can hit the down button, and now the basses are going to play the same pattern as the cello, the lowest note of the chord, but an octave lower than the lowest note. So now I've gone to my editor for the basses. Cursor's in the right spot. I just have to hit paste, and then it drops in my pattern. And then I just have to switch on the pattern here and play a chord. So you already hear the basses and the cello playing together, but an octave apart. So now let's fill in the rest of the chord. The violas, I'm going to, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I already have this copied, so I'm going to copy this pattern, and I'm going to drop it into the second violin's staccato. So the second violins are going to add to this rhythmic pattern, and instead of playing the lowest note, I'm going to have them playing the middle two notes. So that'll especially be handy in 4-note chords, like a 7th chord, or a chord with the root as a top note. So it's going to play, in our particular case, since we're playing a C minor chord, the middle note is at E flat. And that's exactly what these second violins are going to play. They're going to play the second note in the chord. So I can paste in my pattern and switch on this pattern. There we go. And the second violins. Now you can hear the second violins have joined in. There's a slightly higher pitch. So, all right. So we've already got some, now we've got some harmony. We've got some rhythm. Let's add in a bit of a melody. And for that, we're going to use the viola sustain patch. Actually, let's try the viola legato. I'm going to set the violas to play the top note. So in the C minor chord, C, E flat, G, the G is the highest note in the chord. So at least that's the way I'm playing it right now. If I were to stretch it out to include the octave C, the high C, then that would be the top note in the chord, and that's where the violas would start. So let me switch this off. So there we go. So now I'm going to start the melody on the top note, the fifth of the chord in this case, G, but I'm going to shift around with these other steps. So let me draw in, just do a whole bar of that top note. And now these steps here, they are steps in the chord. So it's the next, going above this line, the central point, you're going up in notes in the chord. So it'll be the next notes in the chord, whereas below it will be previous notes in the chord. So with this arpeggiator, you're never out of key. You're never out of the key, because it's only going to be, or the key of the moment, whatever the chord key is, it's only going to play notes in that chord that you're playing. So in our case, if the top note is G, the next note in the chord is C. Since you're just playing a 3-note chord, C, E flat, G, then the arpeggiator is going to know, okay, then the next note is going to be C again. We're going to come back around to C, and then up from there. So step +1 would be the C, step +2 would be the E flat, step +3 would be a G, an octave above, just because I'm playing a 3-note chord. 4-note chords would be different. Like if it was a C7, C minor 7, the next note would actually be B flat, but it's only going to play notes that are in your chord. So let's go up. Let's go up to the E flat. And then a quick C to bring it back. So now I have, well, let's give this a listen. Let me switch this on. And we'll actually be able to hear some rhythm and harmony and melody now. How cool is that? I mean, I'm just holding down a chord. And as you change chords, you hear the pattern changing with the chord. I mean, the pattern stays the same, but the notes change with the chord, and it always stays in that. Now let's add in a top note that's going to harmonize with the violas. Another melody here that's going to play the top note. We could do the top two divisi. No, let's keep it simple. Top note. We're going to play an octave above the top note now, as we want those violins to really punch through, get a nice high end to this chord. And then open up our editor, and let's do so the top note, so I'm only playing 3-note chords, it's going to be the G. Let's start it at the C. So we get G, E flat, C. So this is going to be the root, and we'll do a little descending pattern. Why not? So now we're back to our central note, which is the top note of the chord. And this will go down below a little bit and jump around. So let's see what this does. Pop that off, switch it on. And do we not have a pattern? Oh, there we go. So let's hear our chord in the strings. Oops, give me a second to load up here. Here we go. I can even switch this to legato violins. Give it a second. So when you do switch instruments, it loads pretty quickly to a certain extent. Like, you can hear the violins right now, but it's up here is the loading indicator. It's not yet fully loaded. It's pretty close though, and you won't get the full patch until it's fully loaded. But this does a nice job of giving you a little something that you can play with while the instruments are loading, especially when you're loading a whole orchestra. So oops. So that's the strings, just the strings, and we've already got something useful. Now, if we can also add, I think we should add some percussion. So if I go to the percussion section, and we bring in the timpani, which is right here at the top. So now I've loaded the timpani, and the timpani are pitched drums, so they can technically play different notes in the chord. So you can select which note you want the timpani to play. In our case, I'm going to go with the lowest. It's just we're just in root position, so we'll go with the lowest note. And the timpani, I want them to be pretty low, so I'm going to bump them down an octave. And then go to my editor. And I'll bring these in. Let's try on the ones first. Oh, and I have to switch my pattern on. Yeah. Maybe even add a little. I can add a little upbeat on the fifth of the chord because I know that I'm going to just be playing a root position, so my lowest note is always going to be my root note. I can figure out that C, E flat, G, there's my fifth. And let's hear it. So I can do that, I just don't like it. But just as an example, you can see. All right, so now we've got some timpani. We can even add in, let's do a snare drum. Concert snare. Now this has a different set of note selection here because it's not a pitched instrument, so you can select different articulations here. I'm just going to do, just keep it as a center left-hand hit, keep it at the octave, and now if I go to my editor, we have those articulations rather than notes, rather than steps in the chord. So we did center left hand. Let's put these at the third beat, right as that, right as our 16th notes are starting. And let's see what we've done. I didn't switch it on. So that's why we're not, we only hear it on the first hit, because I didn't switch it on. That's why this is kind of annoying, because you always have to remember to go back and switch on the pattern. All right, now those snare drums are pretty in your face, so what I want to do is I want to copy them, and I'm going to bring the velocity down quite a bit. And now we should hear, now they should be softer. Yeah. So it's a gentle percussion added to our pattern. And then we can add in some brass. I'd love to add in some French horns to kind of work contrary to the strings, to the string melody. So let's add in 2 French horns, legato. Give that a little, that's going to take some time to load. So in the meantime, I will select which note I want them to play. I'll have them play the middle note, an octave below. It's like the way the French horns sing in that register. And let's draw in something that rises instead of falls. So it's running contrary to the violins, but it's going to create a harmony. And we should be able to hear that now. But guess what? I didn't switch it on. And again, I'm just holding chords down. You know what? Let's thicken up our bass line with some brass. I've gone to the basses. I'm going to copy, highlight and copy my pattern. Go back to the brass. I'm going to load in some trombones, trombone staccato. I'm going to drop them down an octave, and then I'm going to back to my editor. Going to paste in my pattern and switch it on. I mean, you already hear the power growing. Like, we started with just a simple pattern, simple melody lines, And it's just adding instruments in and to build up the power. Now that we've got, now that we have a score pattern built, I'm going to go back to my DAW, and I'm actually going to write these chords in as a something for the DAW to play, and we'll move on from there. So I'm just going to keep these real simple, C3, and I'm going to write in my E flat, actually for 2 bars, because we have a 2-bar pattern. And these are just held notes. And then I'm going to copy this bar and move down to my B diminished. And I'll copy that bar, move down to my A diminished. Copy that, move to a G major. There, okay. Now, if I play this, the chord at the end there wasn't correct, so I didn't move my root note, but you hear it. You're already hearing 4 bars, I'm sorry, 8 bars of what could be used in any kind of adventure sequence, you know? And we did that in 15, 20 minutes tops. And a lot of that was talk, showing examples. So if you jump into this right now and start writing chords, you'll have a whole section, a whole movement made in like an hour. So now let's load up another instance of Opus. And we're going to open up a new instance of Orchestrator. Because what we're going to do is we're going to create a change. So we've got this rhythmic march that we now may want to, you know, switch over to something more melodic, more lyrical. And so we're going to bring in very light, sustained strings. So I always like to start with the bass, and in this case it's typically the cello. I'm going to do sustain. I'm going to make it play the lowest note, and I'm going to drop in my pattern, which is going to be, yes, I will keep this one 4 bars because these are going to be long sustained notes. Let's do that. So we'll start with the lowest note. So this is going to be my 5th. And then my 3rd. Okay. And we will, as always, double this in the bass. And it doesn't have to be always, it just happens to work out. It sounds the best. It works out that way in most scores where the bass is double the cello. Paste. Let me switch that to the lowest note. I mean, you can see how easy this is to work with, how quickly this comes together. Let's get a main melody in the violins. And you may work differently than I do, kind of haphazard all over the place right now, just to give examples. Top note, octave up. Let's go and add in a little counterpoint. Does it need to be? Yeah, a little counterpoint. Okay, and we will. This will be duplicated in the violas. So I like to split up my strings where the second violins kind of mimic the bass, and the violas and violins mimic each other. Certainly not something you need to do, or maybe even should do. I could be completely wrong about that, but I like the way it sounds for the most part. And so the second violins are going to mimic the bass, but they're going to be playing the top note. Yeah, why not? Paste. Okay. So let's go through and see. We have to switch on all of our patterns. See, I think this should be switched on by default. And let's hear what we've done. So now we have that nice little string section set up, so we can go drop in our, actually, I'm going to just copy this, drop it into my new instance, and expand all of these to be 4 bars. So right now they're just 2, and I have a 4-bar pattern for my for this little light string portion. All right, and then expand my notes. Hollywood Orchestrator. How cool is that? And we haven't even been in here a half hour, and I've got 45 seconds of music that sounds like something. You know, it sounds like something you could just drop right into a film right now. But and you know, you don't have to play nice chords. You can get as weird as you want with this. Like I can play a cluster of semitones, four semitones: C, E flat, D, C, D flat, D, E flat together. Just hold down a bunch of keys. If you want to go a little further, you can also check out the presets. I didn't start with these because I wanted this to be a real quick guide. But the presets are pretty cool. It's nice way to load up sections quickly. So especially with the ensemble presets, you can load up your long strings, your short strings, load up particular articulations quickly, or even the full ensemble, the whole orchestra, you can load up quickly. So I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to show you the other presets. And they'll even load up the instruments that will have a certain mood for a movie. Then there are ostinatos. So if you want to start with a rhythmic pattern like we just created, but you don't know where to start, you can always pull up some of these pre-made ostinatos that will give you a rhythmic pattern right away to build onto. And this is pretty cool. The scores presets, the producers of this plugin created their own presets that were inspired by popular film music. So, like if we load up Black Knight 1, I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so it just loaded up, and it loaded up all the instruments that it needed. So now we got clarinets, French horns, trombones, a tuba, timpani, a bass drum, and then our strings. And we can go through the instrument sections and see those loaded. And each of these are going to have a pattern as well. Now let's hear it. Actually, let's hear this with the chord progression that we created. And that's going to be back to our little sustain section. Yeah, that's the quick start guide. Obviously, there's probably hours worth of more material to go through, but this is what you want to do right away. This is how you want to use Orchestrator from the get-go. Everything else is going to be bells and whistles, smoke and mirrors. But from here, you can hear what we've done in just a few minutes. Really, all you have to do is bring your ideas of rhythm and harmony and melody to the table, and then you can just play around with different configurations of the orchestra. I'm amazed by it, and I hope that you are too. If you have any questions about this, because I'm still learning it too, so if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and yeah, be sure to subscribe for more Orchestrator videos coming up, and other videos that I post every day on composing and writing. All right, I will talk to you later.